Good afternoon and welcome to the June 2021 DIBBLE webinar. Really happy to have you here, and I especially want to welcome Drs. Mindy Scott and Desiree Murray as our speakers on the topic of youth relationship education, research, and practice priorities. My name is Kay Reed. I'm the Executive Director of the DIBBLE Institute, and as I say, glad to have you here. Now, a little bit of housekeeping. The three most common questions are, we're going to go to the slide in a second. The three most common questions I get during this during webinars is one, my sound isn't working, and the answer is it's probably on your side and not ours. It may be on our side, but typically it's on the user side. And if that happens to you, just log out and log back in, or call the phone number on your email. The second question we get is, will this be archived? And absolutely, we have a robust archive of all our webinars, and we will send you that notification for you to share with your friends and colleagues. And number three, will I get a certificate of completion? And indeed, in the follow-up email, you'll be able to download a certificate of completion. And at the end of this webinar, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a new project we have, which is giving CEUs with some of our webinars. So stay tuned. So the DIBBLE Institute, oh, I know, one last thing. We're going to be asking you polls. We're going to be asking you to ask questions or answer questions in the question box. So take a look at your panel and identify where you can ask questions, and also see where you can raise your hand, because I'm going to ask you something right now and I'd like you to raise your hands. And the question is, how many of you are new to DIBBLE webinars? How many for you is this your first webinar? So answers are coming in now. We're up to about, okay, it looks like almost 20% of you are new. So welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. We do these webinars. They're called Second Wednesday webinars for a reason, so it's easy to remember when they are. And we try to have speakers of interest on a variety of levels around relationship education. So a little bit about the DIBBLE Institute. We are a national independent nonprofit organization. So this means there's no one behind the screen. It's just us. So we love that. I'm based in Berkeley, California. And this is a map of where our clients were in our fiscal year 2019-2020. And you can see that our programs are used in that year around most of the country. And if you know somebody in one of those states, or you're in one of those states, help us fill out the map next year. Anyway, but we have a national presence of people who are using our evidence-based programs. And so next slide, Esther. So we owe our vision and mission to Charlie and Helen DIBBLE. Charlie was an engineer by trade, and I mention that because he liked to solve problems. He saw a problem, he's a fix-it kind of guy, and we know, many of us know those kinds of people. So Charlie saw the following problem. He saw, when he retired, he started working with a lot of young people. He was an interim director for a Boys and Girls Club in Redlands, California. He directed my youth group when I was in middle school. He ran a junior achievement chapter. He organized his Kiwanis Club to run rock concerts for the kids in Redlands, California. So Charlie was all over young people. But he saw a problem with his young friends that had to do with relationships. The first problem was when one of his young friends' parents' relationships started to founder. Maybe they were headed for divorce or just having a hard time. Oftentimes their outcomes shifted and derailed. Secondly, he saw that many of his young friends and young relatives didn't have confidence that they could create and sustain long-lasting, committed relationships like marriage. That it was like, well, we'll practice and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. And so that was the problem he was trying to fix, the suffering that he saw in his young friends' lives. So he consulted the leading researchers of the day, and they could say to him, the University of Minnesota, University of Denver, we know now, we're starting to understand what makes for long-lasting, healthy, successful relationships. And then Charlie would ask the follow-up question, which was, what are you doing to convey that to young people, to adolescents? And they said, we don't know. We don't know how to do that. So it's Charlie's vision to take this research and translate it into teaching tools that then are made widely available to others to teach. So on that last slide, we saw that we reached 67,000 young people in the last fiscal year. That wasn't Dibble reaching them. We're not a direct service organization. We're a curriculum developer. Who reach those people are you, people on the streets doing the good work every day. So we are really grateful to you because you help us accomplish our mission. So so our mission is to empower young people with the skills and knowledge they need to successfully navigate their intimate relationships. And what we've learned from years of research is when you pull this lever, which is the healthy relationship skills lever, or sometimes it's called, getting smart about your love life, multiple other levers are also pulled. A violence prevention lever is pulled, a sexual activity lever is pulled, a mental health lever is pulled. It all goes to the betterment of young people. And that's not to say that there aren't a lot of other levers that are all equally important, but this is one that we often miss. So I'm really pleased for those of you who are helping young people pull this lever in their lives. We're really grateful to you. Now, a couple of thoughts on our key values. We believe in research. We're big fans of research. And what that means is that sometimes as the research evolves, our program materials will change with that. We try to keep things up to date. So it's a little like, remember the beginning of the pandemic when we were washing our mail? And now we don't wash our mail because we know that's not how the virus spreads. Well, it wasn't because science was wrong. It means science evolved, science learned. So we're in that same boat, which is we keep our materials up to date because science evolves. Our second core value is we believe really the best place to raise kids is in stable, safe, and nurturing families. And this can be a single mom creating that safe, stable, and nurturing family. It could be a single dad. It could be step parents, on and on. But what's key is that it's safe, stable, and nurturing. And we know that many, not all, but many young people want to be in a long-term, committed, lasting relationships like marriage. And many of them aren't confident. And so what we see our work doing is helping those young people achieve their dreams that they want for themselves. So everybody can achieve a safe, stable, and lots of people can do a safe, stable, and nurturing. And some people want some help in making a long-term commitment that would make that possible. So we're big fans of that. And lastly, we believe relationship education is for everyone. It's not for just the young or the old or a particular racial group or ethnic group. We all can benefit. We are all. I mean, I think this is pretty much a universal thing. Human beings are hardwired to connect. We're hardwired to have relationships. So it's good to have practice and learn skills around that. So this can be applied to all genders, all sexual orientations. Doesn't matter who you love. Relationship education can help relationships. So we're really thrilled that you join us in that. We make our materials very friendly to diverse people because we want as many people to see themselves in our materials. So we're working on that constantly. And if you have thoughts on that, let us know because we can always do better, but we're always trying to improve. Now to our speakers for today. So today we have Dr. Mindy Scott and Dr. Desiree Murray with us from the MAST program, Marriage Strengthening Research and Dissemination Center. Dr. Scott is a research scholar and program area director at Child Trends. She has a background in sociology, family demography, and focuses on my favorite topic, relationship formation during adolescence and young adulthood. She's led multiple federal projects and must have a stomach of iron because it takes somebody with a firm will to do that, and God love her for that. And she currently leads this MAST center. I've known Mindy for years and she does great work. Desiree Murray is a researcher. She's at Child Trends and also at UNC Chapel Hill. She's a clinical psychologist, prevention scientist, and has done research on school mental health and evidence-based programs. I met Desiree on a panel we were both on co-regulation skills. So I think 2 months ago, we held a webinar on co-regulation skills and how to make that happen for your young people. So take a look at that. It's on our website. So she's also developed a program called Comm, which is a mindfulness-based self-regulation relationship skills program, and she'll be talking a little bit about that today. So with no further ado, Mindy and Desiree, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Kay. That was a wonderful introduction, and welcome everyone. Can you all see and hear me? Okay,
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Welcome everyone. We're really excited to have the opportunity to speak with everyone today. So if we can go to the next slide. We'll want to just walk through the plan for today, and we'll be covering quite a bit. I'm going to introduce you to the Marriage Strengthening Research and Dissemination Center, or MASS Center, give you a little bit more detail on the work that we do there. Some of the work, for example, focuses on youth relationship education that we've been working on over the past couple of years, including research describing adolescent and young adult relationship attitudes, expectations, and experiences. Then Desiree is going to discuss some work that we're also doing that provides guidance for integrating a positive youth development framework for relationship education for youth. And as part of that, we'll talk about the Comm Connections program, which is a specific youth-focused relationship education program that's funded by the Office of Family Assistance. And just to kind of provide a really concrete example of using positive youth development approaches for youth relationship education programs. And then another goal for today is throughout the webinar, we'd love to hear from the audience about priorities for future research and practice related to youth relationship education, and really what you see as priorities to support your work with young people. So next slide. The MASS Center is a multi-organizational team. We're made up of a wonderful group of national experts in marriage and relationship research and practice. Team members come from Child Trends, our organization, also Public Strategies, the National Center for Family and Marriage Research at Bowling Green State University. And all of this work is done in partnership with the Office of Planning, Research, and Evaluation through a 5-year federal cooperative agreement from OPRE. Our agenda for the center is to conduct research on marriage and romantic relationships and on the healthy marriage and relationship education programs, or HMRE programs, that are designed to strengthen those relationships. So the goals of the work are to identify critical research gaps, to generate new knowledge, to help address some of those gaps, and then ultimately help HMRE programs effectively serve the individuals and families that they work with using research-informed strategies. And we are paying particular attention to the programs working with youth. Next slide. In addition to our research agenda, a second objective for the MASS Center is to build capacity for research and evaluation. And so we have a robust set of activities for mentoring and supporting emerging scholars, both graduate students and early career professionals, to help expand and strengthen the field of researchers and evaluators focused on relationships and families. And then we also have a third objective to translate and disseminate HMRE-related research and resources, and that includes a number of resources created by the center, but then also highlighting research and resources from many other colleagues and centers and other organizations. We'll share the link to our website at the end of the webinar, but that's where you can find all of the different products that we've produced, future products that we'll be talking about a little bit today, and then we have an evaluation resource library as well. That's where we feature other resources from the field. All right, so the work at MAST, the research that we carry out is focused in 2 broad areas. One, relationship patterns and trends. And the goal of this body of work is to synthesize and conduct new research on marriage and relationship trends, predictors, and outcomes, really to help inform future research directions and also support practitioners and evaluators working with those practitioner partners. And then second, we focus on program implementation and evaluation research. And here we aim to help to assess, support, and strengthen HMRA programs so that they can better meet their goals and achieve the intended outcomes for participants. So we have a poll where we wanted to kind of start to hear from the group about some research priorities in these areas of relationship patterns and trends or program design and implementation and evaluation, all focused on youth programming. So if you, here, and we've got these options represent some different examples of the types of research we are conducting or could conduct. So if you could let us know what types of research would be most useful for informing and improving future relationship education programming for youth. So think about the top option for you. And then also, if folks have any specific research topics or research questions that you're interested in and that would best support your work, we'd love to hear from you in the Q&A section of the platform. We do have about 2.5 years left in our grant and are starting to think about priorities for future directions for research over the course of the grant. So your input can be really valuable and help to inform our own priorities and plans. Oh, great. So a good portion marked analysis of youth attitudes, expectations, and experiences, and new data on youth attitudes, expectations, and experiences. And that's really helpful. We really want to emphasize the use of research and data to help sort of understand youth population characteristics and relationship needs. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about some of the examples of the Mass Center's work that exactly gets at those areas around using data and available research to understand youth attitudes, experiences, and behaviors. Next slide, please. So the work related to patterns and trends in youth relationships is motivated by several key issues, and I think these align really nicely with the principles of the Dibble Institute and the importance of addressing relationships for young people that Kay described. So adolescence really is an ideal time to focus on relationships and relationship education. Most first romantic relationships occur during adolescence, and these relationships help to build the skills and experiences for healthy adult relationships. We really want to think about how youth-focused relationship education programs can be implemented in ways that take into consideration the age and developmental stage of their adolescent population and participants. And then also thinking about the diversity of adolescent relationships and how attitudes, expectations, and experiences may change over time, but also may vary by youth characteristics. And so thinking about the diversity and variability in the attitudes and expectations of young people. And all of these factors have implications for the design, implementation, and effectiveness of youth relationship education programs. Next slide. So I want to start with one example of the Mass Center's research on youth attitudes and expectations. Our partners at the National Center for Family and Marriage Research are leading this work. We have some of those team members in the audience, so I want to acknowledge Eric Severeid and colleagues. To start this work, we conducted a literature review of peer-reviewed research on adolescent and young adult relationship attitudes, expectations, and behaviors. We're exploring multiple dimensions of relationship quality that characterize youth relationships and summarizing how these early relationships are linked to current and future well-being. For this study and most of the Mass Center's work, we're thinking about adolescence and young adulthood, covering the age range of 14 to 24 with younger adolescents around, thinking about 14 to 17-year-olds and then 18 to 24-year-olds as young adults. And initial findings from this research project were presented at the National Council on Family Relations Conference last year. It's a poster that's linked in this slide, and we also have the poster as a handout. We just have a few key takeaways from this work here. First, when describing or supporting adolescent relationships. It's important to emphasize exploratory dating and less long-term commitment and stability. For young adults who tend to be in more committed relationships, emphasizing communication about relationship needs and expectations as a priority. However, even among young adults, relationships can be short-term, even if there is no conflict present. Relationships can be pretty ambiguous and not well-defined. And then for all youth, really thinking about helping youth recognize both healthy and unhealthy behaviors in relationships and providing supports for ending relationships. So I think all of this really aligns with current youth relationship education programming, which is great, but our goal is to really show the research backing behind these kinds of strategies and see that these findings are very consistent across the research, which is nice, and kind of thinking about conceptualizing adolescent and young adult relationships, which are different, but certainly related to each other. Next slide. Another study by the NCFMR team is analyzing data from the National Survey of Family Growth, looking at adolescents' cohabitation, marriage, and childbearing expectations and goals. The National Survey of Family Growth, or NSFG, is collected on an ongoing basis with data released in 2-year cycles. And what's really great about these data is the measures around these domains have retained the exact same question and response wording since 2011, which makes it possible to examine changes in youth attitudes and expectations over the last decade or so. And then we can also look at gender differences at all time points as well. So we have measures of youth perceptions of whether they will cohabit or get married in the future. Also, 2 measures of childbearing desires, so do they want children, and then childbearing intentions, do they intend to actually have children in the future. We have really preliminary results. I haven't put them on the slide, but just a quick summary, we're finding across all cycles of the survey, so across all of the waves from 2011 to, I think we have data through 2019 so far. Just over half of teens overall think that they definitely or probably will cohabit. There are much higher proportions of youth who expect to marry, with nearly 100% of both males and females reporting that they definitely or probably will get married. And no real changes in that distribution over time or between males and females. In terms of childbearing, the vast majority of teens say they want or probably want to have children and actually intend to have them. And there are slight declines in those childbearing desires and intentions, but still in the most recent survey, 9 out of 10 boys and girls wanted to and intended to have children. Next slide. And then switching gears a little bit, we're also working on an annotated bibliography to help summarize research that calls attention to the diverse experiences and characteristics and relationship experiences of youth. So this kind of gets at the variability of youth experiences piece. This body of work consists of research on youth aging out of foster care, youth involved in the justice system, young parents, and youth who have experienced homelessness. And we're seeing that there's a pretty limited amount of research that focuses on the relationship experiences and relationship education for these more diverse populations of youth. To me, that suggests that there really is great opportunity to expand on this work moving forward. For the annotated bibliography, we identified 26 studies in total. 15 were descriptive research studies, 7 are outcome evaluations, and then there are 4 implementation studies looking at the sort of design of relationship education program for these particular groups of youth. So the final product for this, which will again be on our website, will summarize each of those studies and then provide some overall takeaways and recommendations for future research and practice to kind of build up the body of work related to relationships among more diverse populations of youth. And then next slide. So I want to turn now to the second area of research that for the Mass Center focus on program implementation and evaluation. For the youth focus work in this area, we've been really focusing on positive youth development approaches and ways to integrate positive youth development with youth focused relationship education programming. And I am delighted to pass things to Desiree Murray to talk more about positive youth development and the value of this approach for HMRE. Thanks all.
Thanks, Mindy, and really great to be here this afternoon. So I am going to focus us in specifically on positive youth development as an approach in thinking about application to healthy marriage relationship education programs. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with positive youth development, but it may be helpful to define it just a little bit. So that might help us think about applying it. So positive youth development is really not a specific program. It's not a specific intervention, but it really is an approach. And one of the most important things about the approach is that it thinks about the broad developmental context. So you can sort of see the little graphic there that is sort of like Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model, where when we think about any child or youth, we think about all the different systems in which they interact, which are really influencing their values and their skills and their competencies. And it is not just those who are most immediately around them, but it's also things in the broader environment. And so those are all things that a positive youth development approach might reflect on in thinking about how to support youth competencies around relationship education, around many other things as well, of course. And it would think about how could we engage community schools and peer groups and families in this work as well. The other really important piece about positive youth development, or PYD for short, is that it is very strengths-based. So this is where it is just so aligned with what Kay was saying earlier as she was introducing the Dibble Institute. So positive youth development really starts in terms of thinking about what are youth's inherent strengths, what do they bring, and what are the assets that they have from their families, and what are those things that if we can tap into those strengths and assets would then help build those skills and competencies that youth need that would help them thrive in adulthood. And a couple of real key aspects of that is thinking about the relationships that youth have with those individuals, sort of again throughout their context, and also thinking about opportunities for leadership, which is a way to really support youth's sense of agency. There are a lot of different models for positive youth development. One of the resources we provided today, if you're really interested, is actually very helpful, just sort of giving you some specific ideas of activities that you might even think about integrating into programs from a positive youth development framework. Next slide. Could you go back to the poll? Or no, this is, yes, you're right. This is the next slide. The poll comes after this. Thank you. So sometimes it's helpful when we're defining something to think about how it's different. And so this is sort of a nice summary that was put together or adapted from the Search Institute, which sort of summarizes some of the things I was just saying. So a positive youth development approach would start off in identifying sort of the youth and schools or community strengths and build from there. It would be proactive rather than reactive. Like Kay said earlier, it would really think about all youth. So not just think about an approach that helps a youth who is struggling or troubled in some way, but think about how this is really, for relationship education in particular, this is something we can all benefit from. And adolescence in particular is a fabulous time for that. Thinking about youth as participants, so really sort of, again, honoring their agency. We're not just doing this to them, but we are working with them. And the relationships are a really critical piece of that. We are seeing that in some of our early work with the Comm Connections program I'm going to tell you a little bit about today, where our curriculum, students' experiences of the curriculum very dramatically based upon the particular teacher that they had who was delivering it. And so it was nothing different about the curriculum. The curriculum was the same, but it is the fact that all of us, adolescents, no different, perhaps even more so, learn through relationships, and they learn from modeling, and they learn when they are engaged. And so there's some ways in which I think we can take that into relationship education programs with youth. So next slide. Yes, here is our poll. So in thinking about different aspects of relationship education programs with youth, we are interested in your thoughts about which areas of sort of program operations might benefit the most from a positive youth development approach, as I was just defining it. I love these instant polls. These are so great. What a great way to communicate with a large group. Wow, so clearly engaging youth stands out, and that makes so much sense to me, both from my own work in this area and just sort of thinking developmentally about the research. Not that the other areas, of course, are not important, but yeah, youth engagement can be challenging and may really be a place to think about today how some PYD strategies and approaches might be useful. So we've actually done this. If you want to move to the next slide, we are working on a brief through the Mass Center that will actually provide some ideas and suggestions around informing HMRE programming from PYD. And so these are really some of our initial thoughts, and actually just hearing from you all will actually inform some of that work. So here are some of our initial thoughts, and this might be something when we have time for questions that we could come back to as well. But in thinking about recruitment, for example, from a PYD perspective, one of the things that we would think about is what would really resonate with the youth culture. And culture, I'm using that term very, very broadly. So that certainly includes sort of social media and sort of what's communicated and how to sort of integrate a really important communication tool for youth. In terms of content and delivery, I will also say that these things are also relevant to engagement. So from a positive youth development perspective, we would really be thinking about how to make the content relevant and developmentally sort of responsive for youth. And so I'll give you an example just from our own program this year that we've been piloting in schools. Only 10% of our ninth graders said that they were currently in some sort of relationship. But all of them were very, very interested in learning more about what to look for in a relationship that may be harmful or affirming to them. So that's useful information for us, because at least with our community, it says this is actually something that youth really do want to hear more about. And so we're going to be building up some of that in our program to really speak to them and make this relevant to their needs and their preferences. For curriculum delivery from a positive youth development approach, we would be thinking about building skills and not just sharing information. We would be thinking about opportunities for youth to really reflect on their own lives, on their own situations, and we would be doing that within a program environment, whether that be the school or somewhere else, where youth are going to feel safe and comfortable sort of participating and sharing. And that is not always such an easy thing to do. If that space does not feel safe and comfortable, then the engagement will be hard. It will be hard to get students to volunteer. It will be hard to get discussions going. And so this also sort of then gets back to the relationship with the facilitator and sort of those relationships being at part of the heart of a PYD approach. And so thinking about all the things that have to occur around a curriculum in terms of how that facilitator shares their own experiences, how that facilitator makes it relevant to the lives of adolescents, and if they're a long time away from being an adolescent, what do they need to do to be sort of tuned in that way? How can they really connect this to what's important to youth and what they know from their own lived experiences? And then I think from that place, you can then address other needs, other sort of individual needs that come up for youth when they need something above and beyond sort of your standard programming. Next slide. Positive youth development also really considers where youth are developmentally. And I think there are definitely some ways that paying attention to all the things we know and all the things we've actually learned from developmental science in the last 10 years, there's just been such a huge amount of knowledge. Institute of Medicine just put out a huge paper that is fabulous, kind of summarizing some of the things that are helpful to keep in mind in working with adolescents, both younger adolescents and older adolescents. And so this is just a few things to kind of keep in mind. And again, I'm going to frame these from sort of a positive lens. So often when we talk about adolescence, we talk about risk taking, and we sort of all sort of have some sense that there's sort of this sort of drive towards risks. Sort of one way to reframe that is that part of what this actually means, this is like biologically adaptive, right? But part of what it means is that adolescents are actually really, really interested in new experiences, and there may be a way to really bring that into your programs. And for example, it has surprised me in doing a mindfulness-based program how many youth are actually open to trying it. And I think part of that is it's something new, and you know, they may not be as receptive at a different age, but this is an age of curiosity. Are there ways that we can bring in taking positive risk and utilize that? So thinking about how we can make that an asset or a strength. Another thing we may be thinking of around identity development is how vulnerable youth can be in terms of figuring out who they are and who they are in particular in relationships, and sort of what they want from their relationships, what a relationship should look like. Part of where it may be helpful for us to keep in mind is that's a really vulnerable space for youth. And so are there ways we can keep that in mind in terms of when we ask them to share? How can we help that feel like a safe space? How can we help them feel like it's safe to ask for help? Because asking for help is also a pretty vulnerable thing when your identity is still very much under development. I've mentioned at least supporting youth in developing a sense of autonomy and agency. What might that mean for HMRE programs? I think part of what it means is really giving them choices and finding out what their preferences are and honoring those. and sort of building in opportunities for leadership, I think, is letting them take ownership, letting them take leadership, I think, is a way to, again, also enhance engagement. Another thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately in my work is this influence of peers that we know is so powerful during adolescence. Again, we often think of that so much as the negative influence of peers. How can we instead think about this influence of peers and think about how can we leverage that into a positive peer influence? So is there a way that our programs can really influence or create some of the norms around healthy relationship behaviors, for example? I think there's creative ways to do this. Take some thinking about to kind of flip things in that way. And then sort of a last point I wanted to make about adolescent development is that we also know from some of the developmental science is that adolescence is a time of a lot of sensitivity to stress. And so again, there is sort of some vulnerability there, which I think to me speaks about the need for adults who run programs as well as all other kinds of caring adults to really build some of those supportive environments for them and with them. But also thinking about how there may be ways that that adolescents are also uniquely sensitive in some ways to rewards. And so I know oftentimes in programs there may be sort of a focus on sort of how there may be consequences if rules are violated and points that are lost and things like that. We actually know now from the science that that's actually probably not also effective in terms of getting to your goals in terms of program operation as it might be to actually lean in more heavily on the rewards, particularly, again, if you can tap into some peer-based rewards. So those are just a few sort of examples that may get you all thinking and again, may generate some interesting questions at the end of this. So for the next slide, I'm going to shift into telling you a little bit about our program, the Become Connections program that we have received some funding from the Office of Family Assistance, Healthy Marriage, Responsible Fatherhood Office. It provides HMRA education in high schools as well as other programs for adults. Next slide. So our program, Comm Connections, Comm is actually an acronym. I will tell you about that in just a moment, but I wanted to first sort of share the goals of the program. So we are starting, as many relationship education programs do, focusing in on communication strategies, conflict resolution, stress management. Those three are actually all very specific skills that the Office of Family Assistance really wants to see in the programs they fund. The place where we are really leaning in this particular program, and I know some other programs are paying more attention to this lately as well, is the emotion regulation piece, and that's sort of where we're bringing in some mindfulness as well. So those are sort of the skills that we hone in on, which you could, all sort of summarize as a number of social emotional skills. And we know that those are skills that promote well-being, mental and emotional well-being. And we are anticipating that this will then support positive, healthy relationships with peers, also at home. With family members. And some of the ways that we are really leaning in on that with our program is around promoting compassion and identifying and building and strengthening what we describe as sort of affirming relationship behaviors. Next slide. So the background, yeah, you can click through for this. the background of the program is we developed this at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. We started this program in middle school. The middle school teachers' focus was really around self-regulation, impulse control, and decision making. So that was the initial priority we started with. We have expanded that at this that I'm going to tell you about in a moment, how we've done that. But in terms of where we've been, we have delivered the program now to over 2,000 students. I think we have now been in 5 school districts in North Carolina, several of those rural, although not all. We've done one very small randomized controlled trial. That's the RCT there. And we saw some really positive things in terms of teachers experiencing less stress. They were teaching more from sort of a mindfulness perspective. When we did some observations in the classroom, we also saw some positive changes in terms of how they were co-regulating, which means how they were interacting with youth in a supportive way to help them apply some of these skills in day-to-day moments. And what we heard from the students, I should say we had a very short trial because we were working in health class and it was very difficult to get the amount of time that we had hoped to have in health class at the end of the year. But what we heard from students is that this piece of focusing on emotion regulation and specific strategies to, for example, in our program, Press the Pause, really did seem to resonate with them, sort of really recognizing and reflecting about how they could use their breath to calm down or slow down in a difficult or challenging situation. And they talked a lot about how this benefited their interpersonal interactions, how it helped them solve problems. And so and the teachers actually saw some of this as well. And this is the area that really stood out to us in terms of the greatest potential and impact for this program. So next slide, it made sense to us to really sort of further adapt this for work in the relationship education space. So that is what we have done with the Comm Connections program. We are working now in 9th grade. We work within the context of Avid Classroom. It's an elective that actually is a good fit in terms of providing some flexibility for us to fit our, we have a 16 session curriculum, and so it seems to fit well and be feasible for that context. We're really trying to pay explicit attention to some of the things I mentioned earlier related to positive youth development in terms of supporting youth's sense of belonging and safety in the classroom environment, as well as their sense of agency. We have advisors on our project to help us think about cultural relevance of the curriculum. And we also have some expertise that we have pulled in from some local mental health agencies who co-deliver the program with teachers. That's a really quickie overview. Next slide. I've mentioned self-regulation a couple times, so I just wanted to kind of connect that really clearly to positive youth development. So self-regulation is actually considered, it is considered foundational, or it's at least a core competency of positive youth development. My background as a researcher is in self-regulation. I think I spoke to this group a couple of years ago on sort of self-regulation and relationships. And so this little graphic we kind of like because it really says that self-regulation is so intertwined with connections or relationships, so you can't really tell where one stops and the other one ends. And I really think that that's true. Self-regulation provides just a really sort of, from my perspective anyway, a huge literature from which to sort of guide some of the approaches and strategies that we are using to teach students skills, as well as to work with their teachers and other caring adults in supporting them. So it's been very, very useful for us. Next slide. So here's our acronym, as I mentioned to you. So Comm stands for cool, attentive, logical, and mature. And our program is organized in that way in terms of different modules. So cool is really about the emotion regulation piece. So it's skills for managing thoughts and strong emotions in healthy ways when dealing with stress and conflicts. So for example, we teach students this strategy of press the pause and breathe when they're feeling stressed. We teach healthy coping strategies, and one of those healthy coping strategies is mindfulness. Attentive is defined as being aware of your thoughts, feelings, and body sensations, which is sort of very much what mindfulness promotes. And we focus in here on communication. So we work on listening mindfully and responding mindfully, and we do a little bit of work around how to do that when you're using social media. Logical is the next goal, our next module. So this is defined as considering and making sense of my own and others' perspectives and experiences. And here is where we help students explore their identities, reflect on their values, and think about relationship behaviors, as I mentioned. And then mature is where we bring in perspective taking and a mindful approach to social conflict. Next slide. So just very briefly, I've mentioned that we're a mindfulness-based program, and I know folks have lots of different sort of understandings and definition of mindfulness. So I wanted to just give you our definition. We define mindfulness for students and schools with our 4 key phrases that we encourage them to use. It's integrated throughout our program. It really is simply pressing the pause on purpose and tuning into the present moment with a curious and kind attitude. We have very brief mindfulness practices with students, but it is more that it is interwoven into our approach throughout. Again, there's nothing spiritual about our definition or our approach. It's really just about cultivating a kind and curious awareness that we can bring into interactions with others. So my last slide, I think, coming up next. Oh, and you can click forward. Looks like my box is hidden. There it is. So bringing mindfulness into relationship education work is, it's something that is starting to be done with adults, but not a lot has really been done, at least that we have come across in terms of the youth relationship education space. But there is absolutely research that suggests how this may be beneficial. So we know from research with adults that mindfulness increases positive emotions, it decreases one person's communication of negative emotions to another, it supports more effective coping with interpersonal stress, it is predictive of greater relationship satisfaction and more closeness. All good things. And so what you can see here is this yellow box, which is some things that we don't know for sure, but these are hypotheses, if you will, in terms of what are some of the ways in which mindfulness may actually promote healthy relationships. And this is one of the things that Mindy and I are really excited about our program and the opportunity to study this program and do some evaluation on it, because we're hoping that we can learn more about this through our work in a way that can be more broadly beneficial to the field. So again, it'll be fun to hear any of the other thoughts you all have about what might go in this yellow box when we have a few minutes for questions. So did you want to wrap us up, Mindy?
Yes, thank you. If we can quickly go to the next slide. Here, just wanted to note that our email addresses are here, and the massresearchcenter.org is the Mass Center's website. And again, just invite everyone to visit the site and see what kinds of resources and products are there. And thanks again.
Great, thank you both. This is Kay, and we don't have, let's see, here's some questions. So I would imagine, Mindy, that if people go to the MAST website, they're going to be able to sign up for the MAST newsletter so they can stay informed of all your good work. Would that be a correct assumption?
We do not have a newsletter for various reasons, but have generated quite a presence on Twitter and other social media. So I think the best thing would be to email me directly, and I can connect you to our communications team, and we can make sure that you hear about all of the work that's coming out in the absence of a formal newsletter.
Okay,
But I
well,
appreciate
that's
the
fine. We
interest.
probably get way too many newsletters. So Esther, would you back up a little bit to that so they can capture? There's M.
Yeah,
Scott at
great.
childfriends.org. Bomb her email. I'm sure she wants to
Please.
hear from everybody.
Yep, and
So
we'll make sure
somebody
you get
asked,
connected.
and Adina, we will get you a copy of the slides and an archive of the webinar, so you don't need to have taken all those notes you did so well. You should just check back like on Monday and on our website in the archives, and you'll see that this is up there and you'll be able to see it. So thank you, ladies. You're doing such great work for the field. We really appreciate it. And I love the research part. And Desiree, I appreciate that you're bringing in positive youth development, which is so important. And the whole mindfulness area is just just great. So, so to wrap up, thanks for joining us today. We'll be putting these online by Monday, typically. And there's my email address. I did tell you that we are going to introduce something new, just real quickly. We're offering continuation education credits for a series of webinars we put together on violence prevention. So if you go to this website, so it's our email address or our web address -CEUS and then a dash, you'll see we don't charge for the webinars. The CEUs are $20. So we think that's a service that people were asking us for, and we hope you can take advantage of that. Yeah, so people are saying thank you, Desiree and Mindy, and you know how that they're mindfulness instructors and mentoring coordinators, and they just get it. So again, appreciate you being here. Next month, we're going to have a program on the same kind of thing, mindfulness skills to reduce risk factors in sexual health. We know from what Desiree said that when you slow down, you can make, sometimes have a little pause, you can make better decisions. And our trainer, Dixie Zitlow, will be presenting that webinar, and we hope to see you there. So thank you again for coming today, and have a good start of the summer. Take care.